Okay, hello. I'm Conor Teer. If you don't know who I am, I'm a senior engineer at EverQuote. We're one of the sponsors, so come say hi. We're an online insurance marketplace, sort of similar to something like GoCompare or Compare the Market, but based in the States. There, I'm a senior engineer and the site experiences tech lead, and I've about 8 or 9 years experience in serverless apps, and I've worked all over the show, so front end, data, worked in all sorts of tooling over that time and seen a lot of like the evolutions in serverless firsthand. Outside of work, I like drinking wine, as some of you will find out right after this talk, and spending time with my family. And I'm also extremely patiently waiting for Arsenal to win something in football. Right, what's the context? So for the purposes of this slide, this is you, by the way. I've done a few talks on different things in serverless, and last year I did talk at this event, and I talked about like the different challenges that you might face with serverless. Been in it a long time and trying to convince lots of people to move off Kubernetes in that time. I'm often cited with like there being 2 main challenges to serverless. Those are how do I develop locally and how do I deal with performance considerations. So if you want to hear about how to deal with performance in serverless and how to optimize performance in serverless, you lost to 50-50, come back next year, because we're talking about local first serverless. So what is it, right? First time you try to use serverless, you probably think there's no reliable way to test. You probably start mocking things or using a framework that will let you mock things, and then the mocking's not usually that reliable. And then if you finally get something working, you deploy it into the environment, think you're done, and then you get hit with a bunch of IAM errors because the local framework didn't deal with that. So we take a step back and think like, what are the actual problems we're trying to solve? We want to be able to run our code locally. It might seem stupid to think about, but like, what do you actually want out of a local environment? We want to emulate the behavior of our managed services, and we want to run and develop like what is often distributed apps in serverless. But if we think about like the actual thing that we want to do is we want to be able to deploy with speed and confidence. And that's what we want out of a good local setup. So I sort of have 3 mantras. A lot of engineering leadership and a lot of organizations might disagree with this first one, but I don't think that speed and quality are mutually exclusive. I think that if you have a good process in your teams and good setups, that you can get both. So part of that is we never mock our service calls. I'll get into how we do that, but whenever you're taking a local first approach to serverless, you don't want to bring your local, you don't want to try and bring the cloud to local, you want to try and bring your local to the cloud. And one thing we always want to have is if it works locally, it should work in production, which is tough to achieve, but I think it is a good aim for any organization or team to have. So like I said, best practices, we want to bring our local to the cloud. So how do we do that? You're going to need AWS access to an account of some sorts because we do want to be deploying things. I know for some organizations that can be tough because yeah, it's like not, if it's a super corporate kind of environment, you might not get this, but I think it's an important thing to try and get through some kind of development account or access to your non-production accounts. And yeah, we want to take that approach that if it works locally, it works everywhere. My CTO is at the back, and he might not know this, but we don't actually test in staging. Whenever something works locally, we deploy it straight to production. Our product manager or engineering manager will get acceptance for what they saw locally, and that goes straight to production. And how we do this is we want to leverage ephemeral environments and reliable local environments to share ideas early and just iterate. So like I said, you're going to need AWS access. So there's 2 things you can do. You can create like a separate development account. It's probably easier to get past your compliance teams if you don't have AWS access already. There's probably a reason for that. And this one is a little bit easier to get past, and it's a bit easier to work with, but it does come with some cons, like you've got another AWS account that you need to manage, and it's also not as reliable in staging because, if you want to talk to another service that's in S3 or Dynamo or something, you start to deal with cross-account IAM, and that can get a bit tricky. So I do generally think that if you can put your local stuff in the same account as your staging account, it gives you like a very high level of reliability and allows you to integrate with those staging services easier. There are some cons. Your AWS account is an absolute mess. I think if you open IAM in our AWS account, there's about 900 roles in there from just like local services being deployed by every developer. And it does require your developers to have staging access, which again, some teams might not like. But I do think these things are really important. So it is very important that you work with your security, compliance, platform teams, whoever it is, and try to get like something that enables you to have like AWS access, and don't let them take it away from you again, because you'll just be so productive, they'll never want to take it away. So where does that start? It starts with tooling. There are a lot of frameworks that sort of enable this style of development. What we use is SST, and that'll be sort of the basis of my perspective. But I know that there are some frameworks that are sort of catching up to that way of doing things and sort of enabling services to actually, or to create resources and services in your account rather than doing like mocking. What is SST? So it's a serverless full stack framework. It is an infrastructure as code tool. It's sort of a wrapper over CDK or Pulumi, but it does a lot more than that. It's like a full stack tool. It gives you like resource type checking. It doubles up as a construct library as well if you've ever used those in CDK. And it does allow you to deploy a multitude of front-end frameworks, and it does support a lot of back-end cloud providers. So why does your tooling matter? If you want to take a local first approach, you need something that lets you like actually deploy things to your local account. But also, we want to have a fast ramp up. If you're a new developer and you start in one of our teams, you go into a project, you type npm install, you type npm dev, and you have a database, an SQS queue, event bridge, all that stuff is just set up, and you can just run everything locally with no like additional setup. Being able to do that, that gives us a high level of confidence. And I like to sort of go with the term like local prod parity. Like a lot of teams, strive for, okay, I want my production and staging accounts to be the same, but we take that a step further and say, well, if our staging account is our local account, we have local prod parity. So I'll kind of take you through the journey of how you want to approach like development in this. And obviously it starts with local testing. So if I have this little example architecture, so I have two main components. I have a UI, which is CloudFront and Next.js, and it's got a DynamoDB table for some basic session management. And then I've also got an API. So API gateway using Lambda. Let's say we have two endpoints, so a synchronous one going to S3 and an asynchronous one going to Event Bridge. If you come in and run this with SST, what actually happens is all of these resources that are like needed in AWS run in your account and are created in your account, and they're unique to you. So if you have multiple developers coming in and they all run it, you'll not be sharing resources, like you'll get your own sort of permutation. The Lambda that gets deployed, though, would just be like a shell that proxies requests to your local machine. So if you've got like a node server running, like a request will go into API gateway, but then the code will be running locally. So you get things like debuggers, console logs, hot reloading, all that kind of stuff. And then if you've got a front end like Next.js, that'll just be running locally, but it'll get like environment variables injected in that let it talk to DynamoDB. And like I said, one of the big pros of this is that everyone gets their own resources. So like if I spin up something locally, like I'll get my stack, but then if someone else on the team comes in, they get their stack, and someone else gets their own stack. You can probably see, like, if you're doing this in a staging account, why you end up with a very, very messy AWS account if you don't tear things down. But I think it's a con that's very well worth it. So if you think that that's appealing, what you're going to do is you're going to run off, you're going to try a little innovation project or try something at home, and you're going to be like, yeah, this is cool, this is class. And then you take it into work, and you try to fit it into a real project, and then you have to call like a third-party service, and then like the whole thing falls over. So you might have other teams that you work with or other domains that you need to talk to, and you're just like, oh, I didn't really consider this. So how do we handle service-to-service patterns in our local land? Because you might have like a UI project, which you can spin up and run that locally, but how do you talk to your API? For what it's worth, I don't think this is a problem that is fully solved in a lot of people's local environments outside of serverless. So I think that this is something that serverless can help not match, but actually improve. So the first thing is that you can just monorepo everything. I know a lot of the frameworks recommend doing this. I'm going to go over 3 patterns, by the way, and I'm going to give you my recommendation, but I acknowledge that like different teams are different, and there's different patterns that might suit different teams. So the first is a monorepo. There's a lot of concessions to doing that. Like you might not want to do that for other reasons, right? You don't want your infrastructure as code tools to warp how your ways of working are too much. So yeah, you could do that, and you can just run all 3 of these services at once. The other thing is you could do what you probably do today, which is, okay, I just open my UI project and I run it, and then I just go in and then I open my API project and I run it, and then I go into this event handlers project and I run it. And you can use like infrastructure as code, like imports and exports, to make sure you're talking to your environment. But it's It's a bit difficult to manage. And while a lot of people do this today, I think it is kind of painful and kind of suboptimal. So what we do, and what I would recommend you usually do, is what I call isolating the service. So if you're making changes in your UI project, for example, rather than spinning up your API or your event handlers locally, I recommend actually trying to talk to the staging versions of these services. And like I said, whenever we try to achieve that level of local staging prod parity, I should be confident that this is going to work in production. So how we can do that is if I've got this local setup again, but because all of these resources are running in my AWS account, I have access to, let's say, Secrets Manager, for example. So that then means I can go off, I can grab an API key or a JOT or whatever it is, and I can talk to other services in my organization managed by other teams or in other domains, and I can be confident that that is absolutely reflective of what's going to happen in an environment. And then if you're doing this with AWS, you can just do that through resource policies because you're in the AWS account. So whenever you take this local sort of setup on its own, we can accurately mock what happens in an AWS environment locally, and we can talk to other services in our organization. So whenever you think about that, we're not matching that local development experience you had before in container land. We're actually improving on it and improving the reliability. So you've got that. You've got all your local setup. It's class. It's working. You want to take that a step further and go through what I call preview environments, but they're really just ephemeral environments. Now, the idea of an ephemeral environment is nothing new. It's not a novel idea. Essentially, what you do is I can deploy my copy of our service, not in a local mode, in an actual deployed mode. So all of the code is actually deployed to the environment, and someone else in the team can do the same thing. Cool. It's not a new concept in serverless, but it's how you actually use this concept to your advantage. Some in this room may call this the flywheel. I've never said that, but some people might. But it's about that rapid feedback loop with the people on your team. So let's say as other developers, you can speed up code reviews, right? You can deploy an ephemeral environment, throw it onto the PR. Someone doesn't need to come in and figure out how to run the code locally or check out your branch or anything like that. They just get a link, and you can review multiple PRs at the same time because you're not context switching between branches. So you have an extra level of reliability there. You can also do things like run integration tests or smoke tests against these environments. That's something we do is whenever someone throws up a PR, an ephemeral environment is created, and our integration tests run against that, and they can't merge unless those pass. Whenever it comes to design, you can use this environment to brainstorm things with your designers, right? This doesn't need to be a one and done, my code's done, here's the link, but you can deploy this as you're developing, right? You can start on a feature, deploy this out, throw it over to design, hey, what do you think of this thing? And it's about creating that rapid feedback loop. You can do it with product as well, so get your feedback early, clarify requirements, and ultimately use it to innovate and solve problems together. Because the big thing is serverless is not about technology. As much as we love playing with toys as developers, it is trying to solve a business problem, right? We want to be able to move faster. So yeah, it is a technical solution, but it's not a technical solution to a technical problem. So you've got your local, you've got your ephemeral environments, but you need to incorporate using these things into your actual day-to-day workflow. So your workflow might look something like this today. You code locally. You might get some feedback if you're physically in the same place as someone else, which you're usually not, but some people might be. You'll do a pull request where you might get feedback. You'll do testing and non-prod. You might get feedback. You'll go through design or PM acceptance where you might get feedback, integration testing, testing and prod, all that stuff. You might get feedback at any point in this. And if you do, you usually have to go back to the start and then do it all again. And assuming it gets through again, which it usually won't, you then might have to go back to the start and do all of this again. And this is a very, very inefficient process. So whenever we tighten the feedback loop, we've got accessible local environments, we've got ephemeral environments, and just make it a ball of continuous feedback, right? I don't want to hear that you don't have a Jira column in your Jira board that supports this kind of workflow, or that you have very strict ways of moving through. Just scrap all of that and just embrace the ball of mess that is local first serverless. So you want to get design acceptance early as possible, same with your PM, get feedback as early as possible, run your integration tests as early as possible, and provide really reliable code reviews for your other developers. And then, like I said earlier, whenever our stuff works in this local environment, we just deploy it straight to production. I do test it there, Dave, don't worry. So whenever we think about what are we enabling by doing it this way, so we're creating close-knit teams. Like our product design and engineering teams aren't like 3 separate teams, right? We're like one team that's working together, right? We get tight feedback loops, and we get reliability and speed as one. And I also think whenever you have like a local environment that's so reliable, like you're not really focusing on like the technology ways of things. Like whenever you have that team working as one, like everyone is becoming like very outcome focused, which I think is a really, really good thing to have in a team. And yeah, it's important. Like serverless is not a solution to a technical problem. It's a solution to a business one. We want to move quickly. We want to be able to focus on value, and we don't want to be doing like a lot of useless maintenance work. And yeah, the big thing for me is embrace the ball of mess that is rapid feedback. It's not a strict process. Doesn't have clear steps, but just don't be afraid of that. Just embrace it and make it the way that you work. Thank you very much. That's all I have. If you want to talk to me about any of this, I will be in the bar, probably. But yeah, we are sponsoring at the back as well, so come chat to us at any time as well. So thank you very much.